Hey everyone, and welcome to the second in my series of videos on the Spatial Labs Edition laptop from ACER. In my previous video we took a look at Spatial Labs Go and how it can convert basically anything from 2D into 3D, but in this video I want to show you one of my personal very favorite things about this laptop, which is the fact that it can play AAA games in 3D using another one of the applications built into the Spatial Labs Experience Center. It's the fourth one all the way over to the right, the Spatial Labs True Game app. Not going to waste any time, let's get right into it and take a look at all the games that are available and what this app lets you do, how it works. When you open the app up, it immediately gives you a big list of all the games that are playable in 3D on this laptop. And it says on the bottom left here, as you can see, that there are 118 games as of today in the middle of February, and this list continues to grow every single month. But it really does have some killer titles available in 3D. The ones that are highlighted in white are ones that I've already purchased and can play anytime on this laptop. Some of which include Final Fantasy VII, the remake, Okami, originally on PlayStation 2, Tekken 7, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Skyrim, No Man's Sky, Devil May Cry 5. There's a bunch of games. Those are games that I've purchased and I can play in 3D on this, but there's a total of 118 of them. One thing that you really need to know before you think about purchasing this laptop is that not all 3D games available on this list are created equal. And what I mean by that is that there's a distinction between something that they call 3D Ultra versus 3D Plus. Just to be very straightforward, 3D Ultra is the better version. 3D Ultra is when the developers actually go in and they add multiple cameras to the game so that it is in true 3D. Nothing is like simulated about it. All the effects, all of the things in the environment, the characters, everything is truly captured entirely in 3D, and you can really tell because it looks perfect. Just absolutely perfect playing on this display. Whereas 3D Plus, you can just tell that there's sort of like a little bit of an outline around characters and objects, which make it appear to be more pseudo 3D or like simulated 3D, kind of like the Leia AI conversion, but very good. Like, everything looks great, it looks fantastic in 3D, but if you look closely, you can see that there's like these outlines around things, and that in a lot of these games, you can still tell that it doesn't quite look as crisp and as absolutely stunning and real as these games that are released as 3D Ultra games. And the number of 3D Ultra games is probably a bit less, I haven't counted, but I think it's a bit less than the amount of games that are 3D Plus. That being said, some of the games that I own, like the Spyro Reignited trilogy, you can hardly tell that it's not a 3D Ultra game. It looks so good, the 3D looks so high quality when you're playing it that you would be easily fooled into thinking that you are actually playing a 3D Ultra game. So to me, I think either one is really fun to play. And the 3D Plus game are almost just as immersive as the 3D Ultra ones, which are insanely immersive. As you click through this list, it tells you details about each game related to the 3D, but it gives you like very basic details, like when the game was released, the genre, the Final Fantasy VII Remake, genre RPG, developer, publisher. It also tells you your playtime, the last time you played the game in 3D. Because once you purchase it on Steam, which is where these games are run through, you can play it just 2D on Steam, as you normally would be able to on a laptop or a computer. But this app tells you the last time you played it in 3D mode. To be honest, I would never play any of these games in 2D because I can play them in 3D anytime. And then if you scroll down a little bit, for some games, there's a list of depth controls. The default 3D depth for most of these titles that are the 3D Ultra games is 30%, and then the level of pop out is 100%. But you can take the pop out to 140%, and the level of depth probably up to 100%. It has such a wide range of flexibility in terms of like playing the game the way you want to play it at the level of depth. Like, if you put depth to 100%, it really means like way back into the screen. And for some situations in certain games, if you really like that and that's what you want, it greatly enhances the sense of you're looking like way into a window. There's a ton of depth to this game. And then same with pop out. When you're playing with higher levels of pop out, it'll clearly, most of the stuff is always going to be floating off of the screen. The things that are close to you and the character as you're running with them or moving around is always going to be kind of halfway out or fully just completely out of the screen. And I play with kind of a mid-range of pop-out because it's super immersive to do it that way. But for certain people who might feel a little bit uncomfortable or just have a hard time getting used to this pop-out effect or not like it, if you prefer not to have it, one of the coolest things about this laptop is you can reduce that level of pop-out and it'll actually push everything back into the screen, and that is within your control. You can do it here before you load up the game if you know what kind of presettings work for you, but you can also do it once you start playing the game. There's a little widget, kind of like the Spatial Labs Media Player Go widget, that appears in the top left of your game screen, and you can make it go away. I'll show this to you in a minute, but you can use that in-game to adjust the level of depth and pop-out with shortcuts on the fly. These options for pop out and depth are not available for the 3D Plus games, at least not on this menu before you load them up. But I'm going to show you an example of at least one of each in this video. Also include some 3D side-by-side screenshots of what the 3D looks like on this laptop, so you can view those on any 3D device that you have as you're watching this video, or take a screenshot and view them later. I just want you to be able to see how stunning some of this stuff looks in 3D as you're playing it, because it's impossible to just tell you or even just show you through 2D video. You really have to view it some way in 3D to appreciate how incredible it is. So next I'm going to show you a couple of these games, one 3D Ultra game and one 3D Plus game. But if you're new to this channel, definitely subscribe, and if you're enjoying this video so far, please give it a like. It shows me that you're enjoying this content, and it also helps YouTube get it out to more people so that I can grow this channel and get more people excited about all this crazy, amazing 3D tech that's arriving and better than ever. So the first game I want to take a look at is Final Fantasy VII The Remake. This is a really high-budget, high-end game by a top-class developer with world-class graphics, playable in 3D, which is just mind-blowing to think about, but you will see what I mean in a second. So it's very convenient because you can just click play right from this menu on this blue button, and it'll start up the game. I have my PlayStation 4 controller plugged into my laptop, and it allows me to use this to play any of these games. Right off the bat on the start menu, even the menu, the home screen of these 3D Ultra games is in 3D, and it's just mind-blowingly good. Looks like I could reach in and just pick up this sword right out of the screen. And here, as I mentioned, you can see that there's these options to increase 3D pop-out or 3D depth, and then also the UI opacity and UI position. And then you can toggle 3D on and off if you want to. But I'm just going to load up the game and show you what it actually looks like to play this in 3D. So even like this loading screen, it's also in 3D. The text and the image, this loading bar at the bottom, all at kind of slightly different levels of depth. And now the game is loaded up, and as I move the view around, like this character is popping out of the screen the entire time. Looks like it's just floating here in front of the screen, like about 1.5 to 2 inches. And it feels so smooth and comfortable. It's just mind-blowingly good. But at the same time, if you look out, this is kind of like, you know, like a slum environment and sort of like a futuristic city. And you can see way into the distance. There's this towering machinery or just giant structure. And then between that and you is all this kind of slum area with all these houses. And it's just like real life. Like, best way I can explain it is when you look at something in real life, you focus your eyes on something in the distance, and then that is in focus. And then you focus on something that's closer. Like, if I focus on this girl who's the closest to me, she's in focus. When I focus on the main character, which is a little further out, kind of a little behind the level of the screen here, will be in focus. And then when I look at something in the distance, it's also in focus. So it's incredible technology because whatever you look at, that's what's in focus, and the whole thing is displayed in stunning 3D. It also has a very high refresh rate in 3D. If you set the refresh rate super high, it might slow down performance of the game, but I found like at least keeping it at a stable 60 frames per second, for me it's enough. 60 frames per second with gorgeous graphics in 3D feels incredible, and it keeps the gameplay smooth. So if you move around, the lighting, the shadows, everything, like this laptop can handle some of the top graphics settings for these games. I can pretty much max out the graphics for anything that I'm playing, and it feels fine. It runs smooth and looks beautiful. Even when you're moving fast, the 3D is so stable, and everything just completely pops. It feels so good to play this in 3D. And then when the sparks start flying, and you have a ton of action going on, you start fighting things. I have never experienced gaming that is more immersive without actually putting on a headset or something. It is hard not to recommend this gaming experience to anyone, casual and hardcore gamers alike. One of the other really awesome things is that when you're playing the game, even in the middle of action or battles, you can pause the game and then hit square and go into photo mode. And then this is all in 3D, but the difference is I have the freedom to control exactly what I'm looking at and how I view it in 3D. And if I come close to a character, they'll pop way out of the screen. If you get too close, they'll disappear, but you can still see all the sparks, particle effects in the air stay exactly where they are. The position of the character stays frozen in time, and same with the enemies in the environment. You can zoom in and out. This is not the only 3D game that you can do this with. Like, a lot of these games, especially the newer ones, support this photo mode, which is like the coolest thing to experience in 3D. It's almost like turning any game, any moment in any single game into like a 3D model viewer. I have not figured out a way to capture these moments in 3D to save a photo or export it as like a stereo pair. There's gotta be a way to do that, and if not, it should be a feature that's added in the future, because there's so many situations where that would be really useful, including this one where you're like actually playing a game in 3D or doing the photo mode in 3D and you want to save those photos in 3D, not just view them as a one-time thing. That's Final Fantasy. Now let's take a look at another 3D Ultra game that's a bit of an older game that was brought to Steam later and playable in 3D. Next game I'm going to show you is Okami. And this game has beautiful graphics. It was beautiful when it came out for the PlayStation 2 back in the day, but bringing it to this laptop in Ultra 3D has really, in a bunch of ways, has given it whole new life. Here it is. So loading it up, just taking a look around, like the effects and the graphics, even though you can tell that this stuff is not like current gen, it's not the most recent, most advanced graphics, but this is a cell shade style game, and playing it in 3D like this, I feel no sense of anything being off, or like, it actually looks gorgeous because the whole style of this game is kind of like a moving painting, like calligraphy, Japanese style calligraphy in action, in motion, with color. So these wisps of smoke floating in the air, positioned at different levels of depth, the water rising up from this reflective pool that also has kind of like this calligraphy style, and then of course the main character that you control. Effects like grass, leaves, fire, water in this game. When I jump, there's like these fall autumn leaves that pop up into the air and float right out of the screen. I don't know if you noticed, right now depth is set to 100% for this game, and the character is well within the screen. Not much is literally popping out of the screen when you're set this way. Even when you come up close to stuff, it's still kind of behind the display, and it feels super smooth and comfortable to look at. To me, I like some of the stuff to actually be coming into my space here, and it feels more immersive. So you hit Control F4 to bring up the specific pop-up commands, and Control 3 increases pop-out. So I'm going to increase that to about 130-40% instead of just 100% and see how it looks. Now when I get close to things, they're clearly coming out of the display, and it looks more immersive than it did just now. And the smoke, it looks like it's floating in my room, not just on this screen. In this particular game, you use some calligraphy to like attack enemies, and as you're doing that, you paint with this brush, and the brush is floating right off the screen as you do that, which is really cool. And then the leaves that fly into the air as you hit enemies are also floating right in front of the display. And it's great because maybe it's hard to tell from this angle, but I'm not even sitting straight on to this laptop. I'm sitting at an angle to it, but the head tracking still works so perfectly that everything remains just as immersive as if I was looking directly in front of the laptop. Like, I'm viewing it from an angle, and it's still just as good 3D with great depth and pop out. Last game I want to show you is a 3D Plus game, just so you can see a bit of the difference, but also still how good it is to play the 3D Plus games in 3D on this laptop. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a game that was released in 2021, is also a really huge budget AAA title, also released by Square Enix. But this one did not get the 3D Ultra treatment. It's 3D Plus. So I know to set my expectations a little bit lower, not expect something quite as mind-blowingly good as the Final Fantasy VII quality that we saw at the beginning of this video. However, as you'll see in a moment, it still is incredibly impressive and definitely beats playing the game in just regular 2D mode. Once you get to the main menu, this completely is in 3D, and just looking at it right now, I would be fooled immediately into thinking that this is actually a 3D Ultra game because it looks like it. All the characters from the Guardians of the Galaxy are positioned at different places in this room, and they're moving, doing different things. There's a bunch of objects in the room, and then there's even like a little window from the ship looking out into the space and a planet, and there's a bunch of depth back behind that window. Everything looks actually truly in 3D. So this 3D Plus technology is already really good, but how does it look when you actually start playing the game? Because this is just a menu. So this is more of an indoor stage. I had forgotten that I ended up at this type of place, but as I'm playing it, it really is barely noticeable that this isn't truly a 3D game. Like there's a huge amount of depth between me and the stuff that's all the way down this hallway, and then the objects in the room really stand out as unique individual 3D objects. So does my playable character. When the camera gets closer to them, when they're further away, the 3D effect sort of pops out more or less. And it's only if you look right at the outline of the character you can see blurring. Like, it's like, it really is like that AI 3D conversion on the LoomPad 2, where it looks great, but you're still gonna notice that there's some sort of impainting going on to make the 3D effect happen. But I would say it's subtle enough where you barely notice it at all. And once you get into the game, it just feels like you're playing it in 3D. You don't pay attention. You don't just sit there looking for like each and every outline and little in-painting area on every object. You just play the game and it feels 3D. So I think it really does get the job done well enough, and it makes it feel incredibly immersive to play. Now there are things like when I'm shooting these purple things and they explode, like that kind of pops a little bit more. You can see that there's good depth to that effect, but I have noticed when playing this that there's certain things that just don't seem to be compatible with the depth. So maybe they had to go in and kind of designate a certain level of depth to objects. I'm not sure how it's supposed to work with this 3D plus, but occasionally there's like a laser, there's something that happens at a certain level of depth, but it appears to be at like the wrong level, and it consistently happens for that same effect over and over again. But that's definitely the minority. It doesn't happen that often from what I can recall, and right now in my session so far here I have noticed nothing that feels off in that sense. And this game does just have really nice graphics because it was released, you know, just a few years ago. So being able to play it in 3D, similar to the other games I just showed you, just feels really, really cool. And even in a game like this, when a menu pops up, the menu's in 3D. Although I would say that the overlay is a little bit more kind of positioned at a bit of an awkward level of depth, so it's not as refined as like the 3D Ultra, where they probably literally go in and designate a level of depth for each component of the UI or the menu, where the camera's really positioned and all that stuff. It doesn't get that level of attention to make them playable in 3D. There will be some compromises in areas like that, but they're the less important areas, and when you're navigating this menu, yes, it looks like it's in a bit of an awkward location, but it doesn't bother me enough to turn off the 3D, and it doesn't even really feel uncomfortable. It just is something that I'll notice. That's it. The other cool thing about this menu is that you can sort it by release date. So every time you load up the app, it'll update all the game profiles, and it'll add in new games during the monthly game update once ACER brings in a new batch of games, and they tend to bring in like 5 or 6 new titles at a time. So one of the most exciting things for me is not knowing what games are going to be releasing in 3D each and every month, and then which ones are going to get the 3D Ultra treatment versus the 3D Plus ones. There's so many games that have a ton of potential. I mean, this list has over 100. There's probably thousands of games that would look so great and feel so great to play on this. To clarify though, you do not need to repurchase a game. If you already own one of these games on this list on Steam, you can just play it in 3D once you purchase this laptop, or one of the 3D Spatial Labs monitors sold by ACER. There's so many games and so much detail to what it feels like to play each and every title in 3D, how they look, all the different things that you can do with this true game 3D software. I think I pretty much covered all the general stuff. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to test things out or let you know in the comments about other specific details. And if there's enough interest in gaming on this 3D laptop, I think I will be making future follow-ups to this video that go more in depth in certain areas of what it's like to play games in 3D on this laptop and all the different things you can do with it that I didn't mention in today's video. But I'd love to hear from you if you are interested in gaming, how interested you are in actual gaming experiences in 3D, like on a laptop like this or on the LumenPad 2, because I can also make content like this, reviewing games in 3D, that sort of thing. If there's something that you'd like to see on this channel that's game-related content, that's also related to 3D, let me know and I'll definitely consider making more videos related to this stuff, because it really is hands down one of the most mind-blowing ways to experience 3D on anything. If you have never considered yourself to be really into games, but you love 3D, and you love the LumenPad 2, and you're interested in this laptop, I would say you really cannot miss out on at least trying some of these out or experiencing some games just to see this stuff happening in 3D. Even if you're not going into it to really play the game and play it to the end, just to experience something in motion with a bunch of different things happening, kind of as like a form of art or an experience. It really is worth it because of how immersive and how incredible it looks. But yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I've got more videos coming on the ACER Spatial Labs laptop, so stay tuned for those videos, and I'm looking forward to seeing you then.